Well, welcome to the Vitalmoments podcast. It is a podcast geared around the life of Vitalpoint Church and what we discuss on Sunday mornings. And I'm really excited about this morning because we're in a series right now called Vitality. We do it every year for the last 4 years. Some people are asking me like, man, we've done this before. I'm like, yeah, but have you noticed the difference? They're like, okay, there is something different about this one. And I'm like, okay, they're catching on. People that maybe have been around for a while are catching on to the importance of doing vision and mission every year, because it helps the people that have been around for a while to realign and get their hearts back on the beat of what the heartbeat of Vital Point Church is. But it also helps the people that maybe came over the last few months, invited by a friend or saw an Instagram post or social media thing, and now are starting the journey of faith at Vital Point, and it helps them understand, okay, where are we going? Because we're all on a trip. And this is what I love about us as a church. We are usually giving.
We're on a trip.
We're on a trip, not a drug trip.
We're on a journey.
We're on a journey. Yes. That's why you're the lead guy. We are on a journey.
We're on a Holy Spirit trip.
We're on the Apostle Paul trip.
Oh man.
No, we are on a journey together. And it's so good to know that we as a church. I've had people say in my site, like, I'm so grateful that the leadership of our church is sensing where we're going with God and partnering with him.
Yeah.
So last week, you were honest. We're talking about the vision statement of our church to be a multi-site church that reaches thousands of people who are exploring and growing their knowledge of Jesus, commitment to his church. And we're kind of doing it backwards to forwards, which is really great. And this past weekend, you talked about reaching thousands of people who are exploring and growing.
Yeah.
And I really felt like I needed to prepare some good questions for this because we talked about generosity. And in all honesty, we got to say it out loud. It's not just generosity of our time. We talk like specifically about generosity with our resources, giving back to God to fuel the mission and vision of his church. In this community we call Vital Point. And I want to ask this question to just get us started. How does vitality relate to our understanding of generosity within the context of church and our personal faith journeys? Because you kind of took off the gloves this past weekend and like knocked us around a little bit, but you did it in such a gentle way. One person in Exeter said to me, this was not an awkward conversation around money. Right. You approached it as vitality, of movement, of growing. And I think vitality, if you look in the dictionary, is like a description of rushing waters. But you talked about it from vitality of something that is moving and growing, but then you attach it to generosity. How does that help the context of a community, but also someone's personal faith journey?
Well, when you look at vitality through the lens of an unwavering commitment to generosity, vital communities recognize that our generosity as a community really unkinks the hose of God's grace and provision and understanding in our lives. So we talked a little bit about from 2 Corinthians chapter 9, where Paul writes to the church at Corinth, and he talks about the reality of the all-sufficiency of God's grace provided in our lives. And he attaches it through generosity. So when we as a community begin to grow towards generosity collectively, and people are at all different stages of that in the context, but overall, you can measure the vitality of the church in many ways, and one of them is generosity. How is the generosity of people's hearts and lives towards a mission, which then in turn begins to reveal more of the every good work, like he talks about at the end of the abounding and every good work at the end of 2 Corinthians 9. I gotta look it up, verse 8. I sometimes forget what the verse is. And so when I look at it from that lens, we realize that overall we can measure the vitality of the church through the lens of generosity, or the metric of generosity.
Yeah.
Um, and when we are growing in that, then what we see is this beautiful outflow of understanding and fueling the
Yeah.
specific vision. And the person that I don't know who it was, but it was talking to you about, it's different. It's different because we have spent the last year and a half getting clearer on vision, mission, and our kingdom assignment. And as a result of that, we can step forward with boldness and confidence. We know where we're going. There's nothing worse than getting involved in something and don't know where you're going. Like, can you imagine getting on a cruise ship, going on a 7-day cruise, and we're not sure where we're going?
Yeah.
And, we're just going to head out into the ocean somewhere, and we might hit an island or two. Like, I'm not paying thousands of dollars to get on a ship that doesn't know where it's going.
Yeah.
And so for us as a church overall, now the individual, which is even more exciting, is that as the individual begins to learn generosity, it expands even more so the heart towards God's kingdom. And Jesus talks about this, and this is the go-to all the time, is the Jesus verses in Matthew 6,
Yeah.
where you can't serve two masters, you'll hate the one and love. Because when we begin to learn to be generous, when we begin to be generous personally, what happens in that realm is that there's a shift in our heart away from building our earthly kingdoms where things are temporary, fading, and are vulnerable, towards the things of God's kingdom. And I think that for individuals in their apprenticeship of Jesus, we fail to realize that we're part of a kingdom
Yeah.
that's partially visible through Jesus Christ. And we just think we try to separate those two things, right? We separate heaven and earth, and Jesus is overlapping them in the reality of our hearts. So our hearts and our lives can be
Yeah.
more kingdom focused. So that's exactly where we were trying to go.
Yeah, you mentioned it so beautifully on Sunday that generosity is a reflection of a community's passion, growth, and commitment to living out their faith. It's like the result. Like when you see cheerful givers coming to God, and I love how you said the breakdown. If you look at the actual original language, cheerful bringer means like you're laughing hysterically. Like
Yeah.
it's just like this over, like you're just filled with joy and laughter.
Yeah.
And there's something interesting about that because I know of my life when I've had moments to bless people. I may not have like, hey, like I'm blessing you, and then like laughing in their face hysterically, but inside of my being, knowing that I'm being obedient, knowing that I'm committing to something greater than myself, it just deposits and downloads a joy that it's indescribable in a way. And
Right.
and I feel like, what if a community of people didn't seek the high of the world, like the instant gratification? We've talked a lot about that in individualism, right? You scroll till you want to feel something, you swipe and you feel something, you go purchase something and you feel something. But giving away, and this is what I'm learning in my faith journey of generosity, it's that joy that I seek that only comes from the Lord, that only can be deposited in me through something that is supernatural. And that's where I've been feeling and sensing like, okay, how do I as a site pastor, a site leader, lead people to understand that there's something beautiful in that? But then also our church, notice that as a community, when we come to these events and hear these stories of transformation and generosity, we as a community should be filled up with this joy and supernatural movement of God inside of us. Like, look at us not just personally, but look at us as a community.
Well, I think that and we're going to talk about this coming week, commitment to his church. What I realize is that the cheerful giving within the context of the of faith, which is the church, which is the storehouse of God on the earth. It's not out of guilt or shame or manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
or I give this out of, I feel like I have to. It's actually,
Yeah.
it's, I get to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that or I get to be part of this. I get to do this and I get to be
Mm-hmm.
part of this. And I think I believe that one
Yeah.
of the growing aspects of generosity in the context of a person's life and in the church is that there's a cultural understanding and sense that I get to do this. It
Mm-hmm.
is my privilege. It is my responsibility. It is my honor. It is my joy
Mm-hmm.
that I get to e-transfer, that I get to deposit, that I get to add fuel to the
Mm-hmm.
abounding work that God is
Mm-hmm.
doing here. And then every year when we get together, we do baptisms or we do things that are publicly in our,
Yeah.
one church event, is that, we get to see the investment that we have made in kingdom activities when we see people being baptized. I mean, 27 people baptized last year. The year before that, what was it? 23 baptisms or
23
something like that,
baptisms. Yeah, something like that.
right? And what I love about that in our context is that there are people, those people are in process of being discipled for the vast majority. And so the investment in that is
Mm-hmm.
the joy that we get to do this. We get to be part of this.
You said something really interesting there. Discipling people into that. You were really honest at the end of your message that people ask you sometimes, like, do you get scared or you get nervous around talking
Yeah.
about money? And you said in the beginning stages of your ministry of like branching out and planting Vitalpoint, it was that kind of like, oh, in ways eerie, like, okay, like I hope this lands well. But now you are walking like this confidence and reassurance and understanding that this is
Hmm.
some of the most important and essential discipleship to a community of people, understanding generosity. Can you speak to it from 2 points of views? Someone that is brand new, okay, why is a pastor standing on a stage discipling me and thinks he believes it's essential? And then also talk to the person that's been maybe a lifer, someone that's been in for a long time. And why do I still need to hear this conversation on generosity?
Well, I mean, to the lifer, the person's been a follower, an apprentice of Jesus for a long time. Uh, it's not it's something that we need to continue to hold out in front of people because it's part of our discipleship making process. And I'm amazed at how many people, um, don't give.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of the discipleship process. Like, if you're a growing follower of Jesus Christ, yes, it's joyful, it's cheerful that we're supposed to be giving, but giving and generosity is not an option.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not a take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I am required as a kingdom minded person, a set apart person for Jesus as his church. It is our responsibility in the generosity department. And I think it's a breaking free from the consumerism of our world. It breaks people free from believing that they only live once, so get all that you can. So I think that, and for an unchurched person, this is interesting because we have a fair amount of people in our community that would have a church experience and as much as what others would have. And my heart for people that maybe yesterday was, or sorry, not yesterday, I'll just say yesterday,
This past
timestamped
Sunday.
it,
Yeah.
this past Sunday, is um, actually this conversation is a fight for your heart.
Yeah.
Like, I know that for some it was their worst fear came to be that I was after their money. I was talking about, I'm after their money. God's after their money. But to
Mm-hmm.
help an unchurched person who has not encountered Jesus yet to understand that this is very much about the heart of the individual,
Yeah, it's not
and
what we
there's
want
fruit
from you, it's what we want for
we
you.
want for you. Yeah, absolutely. We want this for you. So to paint that picture, someone texted me, they brought someone new to church, has been in church a very, very long time. And they asked, does the pastor always speak to the new people like that? And and this person was proudly able to say, yeah,
Cool.
that's how our church functions. Because we give room for people, we paint a picture for all people at all stages
Yeah.
of submitting to Christ. And yeah, so I think that that's a critical piece for
Mhm.
us. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of
It's
it's a yeah,
I
it's
think like
part
the person
important.
said to me at the beginning, at the end of our service this past Sunday in Exeter, like it wasn't weird, it wasn't wonky, it was so beautiful. And this person is a lifelong Christian who has been to a few churches that have done a terrible job. They were really honest on talking about generosity with God, and people didn't want to give to God because it seemed like it was this shame and guilt. And um,
Yeah,
I'm just grateful for us as a church that we continue to give space for people. We don't shy away from truth.
yeah,
But we love people so much that we would love hard and go the distance to make sure that we're speaking into your life to understand this is what God desires for you. Um,
yeah,
and this is what he loves about being in partnership and in love with his church. And this is such an awesome piece. So yeah, if you're in a connect group, listening to this, I know in a living room, I've been in living rooms where money comes up and it's like, okay, this side of the room is like, oh, we're all cheerful givers. And then this room's
yeah.
like, oh, I just don't know yet. I can't release it. I think our prayer for you guys as a church, as a connect group, is to know that we are united in Christ, that
Mhm.
many of us are in process. We are all in process of learning this. And what does it look like for you to share a story in your connect group? If you are someone that gives, share a story in your connect group this week of the transformation and the supernatural joy that you've experienced from God in that giving.
Mhm.
And allow someone to see your story, not you telling them that they need to do this. And
Yeah.
allow God to
Can
work
I?
on their heart. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and if I hear this sometimes from well-intended Christians, even at Vital Point, I've heard it recently. You know, complaining about talking about money and complaining about, it takes this much money to run this church, and $1.1 million budget this year,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand where that's coming from because it's actually revealing the heart.
Mm,
They honestly, if someone were to get angry and complain about that conversation of generosity, then they're actually more revealing their heart.
wow.
And people fail to realize that um, how you respond to these talks of generosity and money as followers of Jesus
Mm-hmm.
is very telling. So those in connect groups that are going to, maybe one or two people across the board, we've got lots and lots of people in connect groups. If one or two, you have to be aware you're actually revealing your heart.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do heart checks. I said it yesterday. If people are angry, you need to confess that before God,
Yeah.
because you got money issues, and you're clutching it as if it's yours. And really, when it comes down to, is all that comes to us by God, no matter how little or how much, we are to steward what He gives us,
Yeah.
because we are part of a kingdom of the principle of sowing and reaping.
Mic drop. That's a way to end it right there. Heart
Yeah.
checks.